Howdy, friends, and welcome to the program. This is our first program back in the new year, which is very exciting. It's very exciting to be back with you in this wonderful year of our Lord, 2026. Or if you are of the old way of saying it, right? You're in the elderly category or even the middle aged category, 2026. Sounds so regal to say it like that. But we're firmly now, right? We are, what is it, 7 days in now? We're 7 days in to 2026, which is quite wonderful. It's quite great. It's a wonderful day here in Arizona. We have some rain. It's not raining right now, but it was raining a little earlier, and it's even in the, what does this say, 59 degrees. Man, that's winter weather right there. So we have the full winter weather right now. There was man, there I saw a post that said it's the warmest winter in recorded history, possibly even ever in the West. And I thought, wow, yeah, I've really enjoyed this winter. I've really enjoyed the weather. It's quite pleasant. This is the time of year to be in Arizona, but I mean, I would say any time of year is the time of year to be in Arizona, but right now it's especially beautiful. And perhaps, since it's going to get into the mid 30s tonight here up on the mountains, we might even get some snow that lingers around tomorrow once the clouds and the rain dissipates, which is going to be very beautiful. Hopefully it drops a pretty good load on the mountains around the Superstition Mountains. If you've never seen them, some of the most beautiful mountains you'll ever see. And my goodness, when the I'm just picturing it right now, but when the snow is on those mountains and you just go and look at them, it's so beautiful because you have the desert right at the base and you have these gorgeous mountains that just jut up from the earth, and the snow, that the white all over it, you see it just kind of blanketing all over those gorgeous mountains, along with other mountains around. Like we have Four Peaks. Camelback doesn't get snow very often, nor does South Mountain, but even like the Estrellas, um, the McDowells sometimes, Pima Mountain, which is way off in the distance, far east. Santans don't usually either, but it's just beautiful to see the snow on those mountains, and to take a little trip over and look at the beauty of God's creation. So hopefully we get something like that tonight. So tomorrow we have some beautiful snow to wake up to on the mountains. It's supposed to get right into the mid 30s here, so perhaps a little freeze, a little ice, some frost, which is fun. But certainly probably not going to have any snow here, which would be a pretty unusual thing. It happens every so often, but it doesn't stick, and it's just more it falls into from the sky, and that's about it. It barely even hits the ground, and it certainly doesn't accumulate. So we'll see how the weather goes, but it's quite beautiful. It's quite wonderful, and we're in 2026, and you know what the new year brings. The new year brings resolutions. The new year brings plans and decisions on how to move forward and what life is desired to be like. So many people, we talked about this right at the last program, so many people use December as a time not only to celebrate family and faith and community and friendship and whatnot, but they also use it to cir- not circumvent, but well, I guess kind of go about the whole year that's happened and contemplate what has happened and decide, was it a successful year? Was it not a successful year? And that's an important time to do that, right? It's a natural time to do that with the calendar ending as we flip to a new, not only month, but a new year and have to get a whole new calendar. It's good to go back and look at how the year was successful and where it went well and where it didn't. And then as January approaches, and now that we're in week one, finishing up week one, that we go, well, what can we change? What needs to be done differently? I mean, you've seen the million Planet Fitness commercials or your local gym or whatever like that going, join for $1 down and then it's $15 a month kind of a thing. And because everybody's going to the gym, this is, it's time to get rid of the winter coat, even though winter has just started. and go and work out and get that body you've always dreamed of or you haven't had since high school or college. And that's fine. That's great. But so many people, they peter off throughout the year, especially in January. Only a few weeks in, most people just stop whatever their New Year's resolution is or the plan that they have for the year is. And it's good to continue to move forward with that. And perhaps the issue with that is that people, when they make plans, they have the ultimate end in mind. And when they don't see that goal realized, then they get discouraged or it's really not the right goal for them and they just give up on it. The important part, and this is true in personal planning, New Year's resolutions, personal finance, family planning, things like that, where you're actively working to make something different. It isn't necessarily that you want to hit that end goal. It's the process that it takes in order to get to that end goal. Now, what do I mean by that? When you go and make a plan, right? Whether it's a business plan, a personal plan, New Year's Eve, ideas are flowing through the eggnog and the champagne and the clock strikes midnight, and then you go, all right, now my goal is to be, 165 pounds again, and I want to be lean, mean, and a fighting machine. All right, well then how are you going to get there? What's the process to get there? That's more of an ideal. It isn't necessarily a goal. It's something that's just out here in the ether that you want to get to, but do you actually have a plan on how you're going to get there? Because the important part of planning is the process being completed appropriately so you know what you are going to then do. Right? It's about process. Just as planning is a process, so accomplishing a plan is a process as well. Taking what you need to get done and faithfully completing the processes in which you will accomplish your goal. So if it's whatever, losing weight, saving money, visiting friends, what are these processes that you need to perform in order to have those goals realized, right? Goals are just kind of like checkpoints along the path. It's like running a race. The importance is putting one step in front of the other. It isn't getting to the finish line, right? You can be at the starting point and be like, I want to win this race. I want to finish. And then what? If you don't move, if you don't perform the actions that are required in order to complete the race, then you're not going to get there. And you can be discouraged and be like, oh no, it was never going to happen. I was never going to do it. It was just a stupid idea, a dumb goal. Well, maybe not, but if you're not going to do anything to get there and you're not going to persevere to get there, well then yeah, it's a stupid goal and you shouldn't do it. But if you're going to persevere, you want to do it right, you have that idea, you have that conviction, you know how you're going to get there, then do it. Nothing wrong with that. Then do it. So when it's losing weight or saving money, investing, whatever it is, growing your family, what are those actions, those processes that you have to go through in order to get to those ends? That's ultimately how success is measured, how faithful you are to the process, because things are going to come up, right? You're going to find that grandma sent more peanut brittle and it got lost in the mail and it finally arrived after she sent the second batch because the first one got lost, and you're going to be like, man, here's all this peanut brittle. I have to eat it because grandma would be offended and I'm not going to let all this good food go to waste. Don't let that peanut brittle go to waste. You got to eat it, right? But you still got to follow the process in order to lose the weight, get whatever you're trying to, whatever goal, whatever checkpoint, endpoint you're trying to meet. So if it is, there's a change, right? There's always going to be change. There's always going to be things that happen that change the circumstances and come up, and you have to pivot and whatnot. Then pivot. You got the peanut brittle, do the peanut brittle pivot. Work out a little more. Work out a little extra. Cut back on having a drink or something like that. Go without coffee or soda instead, kind of a deal, right? It's adjusting the process so that you're continuing down the path of reaching that goal. So that's kind of a bit of a diatribe, but Important to note, when it comes to, I guess, aspects of faith, I think this is important and should be said. I got to preach a wonderful message on New Year's Eve Sunday, which of course was not New Year's Eve, but it was the 28th, but it's New Year's Eve, the final Sunday of 2025, the last Sunday of the year, essentially. And the text in question that we looked at was Deuteronomy chapter 10, the latter half of the chapter, and it was quite edifying. It was verses 12 through 20, if you're interested. And what we looked at was what, and this relates so well with the new year. What does God require of you? What does He desire? What does He require? Now, in the timeline of everything, this is Moses coming down from Mount Sinai, round two after the golden calf incident, and after he threw the two original tablets of the law onto the earth, onto the ground, and they shattered, right, as he saw their idolatry and their essentially orgy, and everything that was going on there. So he goes back up, he gets the law again, he comes back down, he gives Israel the law, and he goes, well, here's the law, and you know what? Here's what God actually desires. This is the heart behind the law. You have it written, you have the goal, if you will, you have the information as to what it looks like in order to get there, but it isn't just you're not just a robot. It isn't just plug these things in and then you get the output that's desired, right? It's not like a recipe for food kind of a deal. It isn't just put in the instructions and then perform it right correctly, and then out comes, God's happy because you did whatever. There is a deeper thing that comes with that Moses notes in Deuteronomy chapter 10, and it's the circumcision of the heart, the removal of that foreskin, the outer skin of the heart that is tough against God, the tough skin on the back of the neck, like an ox would have, against God, with the face turned away, turn towards God, remove that skin, and love God. That's the ultimate goal, right? To keep the commandments of God and His statutes. How do you do that? Fear God, walk in His ways, love Him. That's the center of it all. The most important, serve Him, and keep His commandments. All 5 of those, which revolve around love. If it's not done in love, it's sin. So, when it comes to this new year, and you're going, I want to get back into the Word, I want to see my faith grow, I want to get closer to God, I want to have a more personal relationship with Jesus, I want to pray more, so on and so forth, all fantastic desires. The problem is, though, when you pursue those things without love in your heart. If you just think, like the fundamentalist does, that I have to do this because it's part of Christian culture, and if I don't do it, people will look down upon me, people will have bad thoughts about me, God will be displeased about me, with me. No, that's not good. You have to have love, right? When you're doing those things, when you're being obedient, right? Or else it doesn't matter. It's sin, really. It's trying to cover yourself with your own works of righteousness and not with the righteousness of Christ, which is ultimately filth, absolute unclean, disgusting filth before God, no matter how hard we try. And on the other side of that, too, people are just like, I just love God. You know what? It's the spiritist kind of a deal. I love God. I go out in nature. I talk to Him when I want, how I want, and do what I want in order to worship Him and live my life how I want, but I think about Him because I love Him. Well, they're missing the whole obedience part, right? The whole walking in His ways, fearing Him, and trusting Him, the other 4 parts, right? And the love that they really have for Him is more of like it's not even like an affection. It's more like nostalgia, perhaps, or something like that. Like, I used to, we went to midnight mass as a child for Christmas, and this, that, and the other thing, and it just gets me in the feels, and It's just so good to commune with God in that way. And it's like, all right, well, okay, you have clearly uh, a drawing towards Him, I guess. But if you're not worshiping Him the way that He desires, right, truth, as well as spirit, then it doesn't matter. It has to be both. It's not worship if it isn't both. All right, you can't lack one or the other and call it worship, call it love. It both are integral to that. So love has to be present. You have to love God in order for what you do to be acceptable in His sight and to be good in His sight. So if you just read the scriptures, read the Bible, and you're like, I'm going to do this 1 year plan because I just need to do it. Don't do that. God doesn't like that. He hates that, actually. He wants you to love Him, because the amazing thing is, and this is just so stunning, it's seen in Deuteronomy 10, though it doesn't talk about the crucifixion. It talks about the absolute vast space that is between God and man, how He is higher than the highest heavens, which is, He's higher than the galaxy, the furthest star that they could see back in the day. He transcends that, yet He's chosen these people, these Israelites, to be His people. And He has communed with them, given them His law. And the same thing we can look at for ourselves ultimately with His ultimate display of love, right? Is that He is higher than the highest heavens. He is creator of all. He is beyond everything, yet He is everywhere and all powerful and all present, and yet He was born, right? The Christmas story, born as a baby, as a man, came as a man, the God man, and lived a perfect life, and died on the cross in the most grueling death possible, and bore, even more amazingly so than His suffering physically, was His bearing of eternal hell, the eternal wrath of God that we each deserve, upon Himself, and satisfying that requirement, so that He took the penalty of the lake of fire, so that we who are saved by Him do not bear that, but instead have His righteousness, so that we can live eternally with Him. What a crazy thing to even think about. The God who created everything comes down in such a lowly way. Philippians 2, right? His eternal glory in the past comes down, sets it aside for a time being, so that He can live this life, die in this way, bear this penalty, and provide it to those whom He loves, and then is reascended and re-glorified eternally. It's quite stunning. It's quite stunning to think about. And that's the point, right? If you are going to love God or do something, but you don't love God, how can you even do that? Now, I know sin, right? Obviously, sin is the detractor of all that. The flesh, the wrestling that exists between flesh and spirit. But when you just think upon it for even a second, how much God, who is so mighty, who is so great, who is so fearsome and awesome, what He did and how much He loves us by showing that ultimate love through the sacrifice of His own Son, through the sacrifice of Jesus, how can you not love Him back? I mean, we can't love Him as much as He loves us. Never will be, right? That ability. But when we see His love for us, then in turn that should garner more love for Him from us. So when you're going about the reading plans or the prayer plans or doing devotionals or Bible studies or this, that, or the other thing that's meant to guide you closer to God and whatnot, or you think is going to be pleasing in His sight, do it out of love, or don't do it at all. Don't do it at all if you're not going to do it out of love. And examine your heart. And I have to do this too whenever I pray, whenever I read scripture, whenever I prepare for a teaching or a sermon. Am I doing this because I love it, because I love Him? Or am I just doing this because I feel like I have to check a box, or I'm doing it selfishly? It's got to be out of love for him. So think about that. I guess that was the sermon that we had the last Sunday of 25, and very applicable for planning and all these things as we continue into 26. So very exciting. That's not all we're going to talk about today. We've really kind of stuck on the New Year theme for a while. We had a lot of interesting things. Well, maybe not. December kind of went by relatively uneventfully, in my opinion. But we've had some interesting things happen so far at the beginning of the year, right? With the capture of Maduro. We have the seizing of oil tankers now in the Atlantic by the American Navy that are either one was a Russian ship and the other one was just didn't have a flag, essentially a dark tanker, part of the dark fleet. And kind of seeing the Greenland rhetoric ramp up again. And it's been very interesting to see the commentary from all different sides of the aisle and different stripes of people as to what's happening. And I think it's very clear, maybe just to add some clarity as to what's happening from a large, zoomed out standpoint, and not from like the meme cliche standpoint. The getting rid of Maduro has very little to do with oil and access to oil. America doesn't need Venezuela's oil. As of today, the price of a barrel of oil is $56. Now, that's relatively inexpensive. If you remember back in, well, there were a couple different times, but it was well over $100. And that was intense to experience oil at that point in time, because gas was certainly expensive as well. When it was $4, $5, and now it's so cheap it doesn't even matter, right? Think back to 2022 with Biden, how expensive it was then. Back into the early 20 teens, mid early 20 teens, it was over $100 a gallon. It was expensive then, and it's really dipped down. And America has a plethora of oil. The regulations surrounding that are coming down. The issue really is the refining process for gasoline, as opposed to the pumping of oil. America, right, exports a good amount of oil and is the world's largest producer of oil. We don't need Venezuelan oil. The market doesn't need Venezuelan oil. OPEC is pumping more oil on its own, at its own decision to do that. The market is going to see more of a supply glut than anything like that. So saying that it was to seize access to the oil and whatnot, no, really not, because it's just unnecessary. The world doesn't necessarily need that. The world isn't clamoring for that. It'll make certain companies, right, more money, like Chevron and others that have contracts into Venezuela currently, and others that will get it. But it's not like that's this highly guarded Eden kind of a deal that they just got to get into so they can just pump all this black gold and make a ton of money. No, on the other hand, gold is quite expensive, right? It dipped under $4,500 an ounce. Silver has gone parabolic and is at $78 an ounce, which is quite high. Other precious metals have gone up. Nickel has increased. Platinum has increased. Copper, I believe, even is increasing. But crypto is not. Crypto has been pretty flat, especially Bitcoin, over the last month or so. And it's interesting to see how all of these different movements, because, right, they give you it's it's kind of a different light on your car dashboard, right? It tells you something different. It doesn't just mean that there's something wrong necessarily. It could just be that there's a door ajar and need to close it a little tighter, kind of a deal. It's just kind of a reminder. Or look in the back seat because you open the back seat door and put something back there, so it knows to remind you of that. But it can be that there's something wrong. However, the Maduro thing is about geopolitical order. It's about protection, and it's about asserting dominance. It is not about oil. It isn't even really about drugs either, because, well, there are drugs that flow in from Venezuela to America, certainly to other parts of South and Central America. That's not the primary reason. The primary reason is because Maduro, right, was friendly with hostile American regimes. Specifically, Trump's concerned about China getting into the Americas, like it has been working to assert its dominance and its control, increase its sphere of influence. And Trump sees the threat of that. And he sees that right in two places. You have first coming over the Arctic. That's why he has the rhetoric about Canada becoming the 51st state and annexing Greenland, not just for their minerals, but really for protection, and having full control over that. And then you have from the south, that being kind of similar to like back in the day with the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? That was another front that was exposed in the American underbelly. So Venezuela is a launching point for Chinese influence, for Russian, Iranian influence. So in order to essentially seal off the hemispheres and the oceans, dominantly so, and the skies, then he has to ensure that those nations that are within his sphere of influence, the American sphere of influence, follow after America and are going to be kind of subservient or like puppet like in an extent, something along those lines, to the American hegemon in North and South America, in the Western Hemisphere. So it isn't about oil. It's not about drugs. Those are just kind of covers. Those are cheap political points to take and make, and whatever. And the same thing with Greenland, right? It isn't that we need another 60,000 people to add the 51st state if Canada doesn't want to do it. We don't need more states. We really don't even need more people. But he wants to ensure that the path of nuclear capable weaponry is detectable early enough if launched from Russia, which we have a far superior military than them, and especially intelligence capabilities, that we would know that they're launching nukes before they know that they're launching nukes, kind of a deal. And but in order to have defense capabilities to shoot those down to protect, then Greenland and Canada are the answer to that. And similarly with China, because China, if they wanted to go over, and they are very friendly, right, with Russia, if they wanted to shoot over Russia, it would go over the Arctic and then to America. It wouldn't go around. It wouldn't go across the Pacific. That would be the longer route for it to take, for those missiles to take. And, right, war is not necessarily conventional anymore. It's much different. We've seen what is happening in Ukraine. We've seen fighting, in the Middle East and whatnot with the wars there, in Syria, the current wars in Africa, but most notably in Ukraine. How war is transforming from this traditional kinetic way, what we would now consider traditional, to something that's new and hybrid, which is just going to become traditional in the coming years. And it's very missile driven, right? It's very drone driven. And in order to protect against those things that are coming, whether autonomous or manned, then you have to have a defense. And if anything happens with America and Russia or China, then that's going to come over the Arctic. Whether it's a drone, whether it's plane, whether it's missiles, it's coming over the Arctic. So in order to protect against that, there has to be almost like this front that is established with military capabilities for defense. So that's Trump's whole thing. It was announced quite a while ago, right, that it's essentially what he's asserting again is the Monroe Doctrine, which back when President Monroe was in office, he said, Europe, you stay out of America. This is, North and South America. And, you can have whatever you want that's across the Atlantic and in the Eastern Hemisphere, but don't touch the Western Hemisphere. Stay away from us. Your influence is not going to be aided with your colonial claims or anything like that. Your grip over whatever you have is going to diminish, and that is because this is our sphere of influence. This is what we are going to say and stake as our area, our dominance, and you guys can figure out what you want over across the pond and have fun doing that. In Africa, Asia, have at it. But not over here, not in North and South America. So Trump is doing that again. Is there a long-term play in minerals and in resources that he's trying to decouple from the rest of the world? Certainly, especially when it comes to rare earth materials. It's probably as they continue to find more of those deposits stateside, it's not going to be super easy to get those extracted nor cost effective as opposed to just importing from China or Vietnam or anywhere in Africa like that. So when they find more materials like that in Central and South America, then he's going to say, we want you to export those to us more exclusively and let Asia, Europe, and Africa kind of fight it out amongst themselves as to how they're going to run their economies, their tech, everything like that with their own materials. And essentially, America will be self-sufficient because it will have all these different countries that it's essentially protecting. It'll probably be something similar, not NATO-esque, but very much so kind of like the closeness of the European Union, kind of like a common market, though not with the same currency or government structure over top of all of it, but just close collaboration. It seems is what his desire is, kind of as providing America with safety and resources beyond what it currently has in its borders and ensuring that lasts for quite some time, as well as military defense. So that's his angle. It's not oil. It's not, America doesn't invade people because of oil. It's quite a ridiculous claim. Though it may look like that. And yes, our dollar is essentially the petrodollar. That's fine, but we've really gone past that. We're the monetized debt dollar. We are the world reserve currency. If that changes, the dollar collapses, but so does the entire world's economy. It absolutely crashes and burns. And that's the importance of the dollar. That it isn't because it's pegged to gold and it's a dollar is supposed to, $20 is the price of gold for an ounce, and that's the peg or anything like that. No, it's that the debt that we are funding the world with our treasuries and the entire banking system of the world being driven by that's what gives the currency value and the American dollar importance, as well as commodities being traded in it, business being done, and so forth, especially oil, right? Oil is a very important commodity. But the debt, the treasury dollar really is what it is more than the petrodollar now. So that'll continue to develop. We'll see what else he does. He's definitely, it's just funny to see this stuff happen, and then it just flies in the face of him being a Putin puppet or anything like that, where he's catering to dictators and stuff like that. It's like, all right, well, you're seizing a flagged Russian ship that's carrying oil because it's sanctioned. I'm not sure how that goes and helps Russia or China or anything like that. And clearly there was no trade-off with providing China with Taiwan and Russia with Ukraine or wherever else it desires, so America could have Venezuela. Um, that right. Remember back to 2024, Venezuela had a very fraudulent election. The president who actually won has been in Spain as an asylum seeker since then. Maduro was a dictator because he lost and he didn't leave, even though right the left claims that the same thing happened right in 2020 with Trump, that there was a coup and that right he tried to stage a coup and somehow did that, even though there was no coup because he left office peacefully. But January 6th was a coup, and there were claims of right all the fraud that occurred in the election, but that just couldn't be, no one would substantiate, or even though they changed the laws at the last moments and whatnot. But Venezuela very much so was the route where there was fraud. The loser asserted that he won, and was the one who was already previously in power, and he stayed in power, and then persecuted his enemies and clamped down. And I guess also it has nothing to do with Israel or gay marriage or exporting sodomy or something like that. Just because Maduro didn't like Israel because he's a socialist, so he's aligned with Palestinians, with the Iranians, with the Russians, and that's just the geopolitical divide. Doesn't mean that it was time to take him out. It really has nothing to do with that. America's not subservient to Israel. It's quite crazy. The paranoia of that continues to grow, which is very frustrating and annoying to continuously read. People are not pondering anything. They're not letting, I don't know, the outrage, clickbaity stuff, cliche sayings, things like that are just being mulled around and reused over and over and over again and applied to anything. But there's no pondering. There's no intentionally thinking about something and mulling it over and trying to determine what it actually means or what is actually true. So it's quite embarrassing when people say that Israel is controlling the world and Israel is the reason Maduro's out and this, that, and the other thing for Israel. And it's embarrassing too in our same camp, right, of Christians and people thinking that Christian nationalism, this Christless nationalism piece, because they're so anti-Israel, is the way to go, and that's really their only unifying rallying cry. It isn't that. It has to be that because there isn't anything else that unifies them. Like you'll have Joel Webben, who's well, I guess he previously interviewed Nick Fuentes, and now they're dripping out these episodes, unless you want to pay for them, 10-part series, so that he can be in with who he thinks is going to be politically important in the future, which is quite ridiculous. It really is just acquiescing, kind of selling your soul for what you think is going to go well. But the thing that unites them all, that they all can agree on, whether they're Catholic, whether they're Protestant, whether they're Orthodox, whatever they are, these Christians, is that they don't want Israel to exert its influence anymore. They have a paranoia about Israel, about the Jews. And it's embarrassing to see, really. There is no pondering. There's a lot of words that have been written down and exchanged and used, but the bedrock of their philosophy, of their political ideology, is anti-Israelism, which is so strange. And of course, And of course, that is controversial because of how they propose that ideology through Holocaust denial, through anti Jew uh, rhetoric, through conspiratorial fabrications, not connecting dots that clearly exist, but fabricating connections to dots that obviously do not exist. Whether it's with the Charlie Kirk assassination, whether it's with Maduro, whether it's with the banking schemes, whatever it's Hollywood, politics doesn't matter. There's always an enemy to be made because there's a Jew somewhere in power, um, which is quite crazy. There's no Indian conspiracy for doctors though, or optometrists or something like that, where they all are, or surgeons. But and that shouldn't be cause for concern. But the Jews having their areas that they push their people into, that's a cause for concern. I don't know. It's a very strange thing. It's very annoying. The paranoia is nonsensical. It is socialism. It's a form of socialism, right? Not Nazism per se, but it's this weird European-esque socialistic paranoia that's existed for a very long period of time, hundreds and hundreds of years, and it just resurges every so often, and it is resurging right now, and it's quite ridiculous to hear and see and look at, and read, and it's just so strange. It really is just so strange that that's what unifies them, because even like in the Webben and the Fuentes dialogue, or whatever you want to call it, where supposedly Webben is supposed to be getting Fuentes' thoughts on everything, even though he's speaking as long, if not longer, than Fuentes is. Uh, it's constantly just back to this. What is this unification on? It's the Jewish piece, because those two are on two separate spaces. Webben is supposedly Reformed. He's Protestant of some form, uh, however he defines that. And then Fuentes is a Catholic to some extent. So their approach to how politics are done is very different, and what that realistically looks like. Case in point is the first example, or in the first episode, Joel is pro death penalty, and very loosely, liberally, with the death penalty. He says, he relates this back to Mosaic law, ironic, that if a pit bull is known to be aggressive, or I guess the species is just aggressive, not the species, the breed is just aggressive. If it kills someone, then the owner should also be put to death along with the dog. And then you have Fuentes, on the other hand, who says we should not use the death penalty except in very rare circumstances for anything, only for the most heinous of crimes, which is murder. And it's like, wow, you have a very wide gap in between what is being desired by two men who supposedly are supposed to be pushing forward the same ideology, the same Christian nationalism. They take that moniker, they wear it. Right, America first. Fuentes is that, and Joel agrees with that. And it's just such a strange thing. You have such a wide divide in those two areas, and especially on like blasphemy laws, anything like that, regulating how people interact morally within a society, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, what they're allowed to do in their own homes versus what they're not allowed to do in their own homes, kind of a deal, versus in public. And there's just such a wide divide, and you go, this seems really strange. Like it's very how do people, these two guys who have such different political ideas, unite? It's because they have a common enemy. They hate the Jews. And that's what they talk about frequently. That's their red herring. That's their scapegoat all the time, is that's where they unite. And they have this very strange view that there's like this post-war consensus after World War II. This new world order has been ushered in, and it's created this strange new hybrid religion of Judeo-Christianity, um, which is not even a thing. Um, but that's all that they unite on. There's nothing else that they unite on. They'll put down their barriers that have been traditional and long standing of Catholics and Protestants being opposed to one another politically and religiously because they have a common enemy, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that's really what it is. Even if realistically, there's no way that those two could cooperate together if they were in political power together. There's no way. It wouldn't work out that way. It just doesn't work. They're two diametrically opposed individuals. They just hate the same people. And that's really what it is. It really is hate. And these lines have been drawn as to what this Christian nationalism garbage is, whether it's with Corey Mahler or Stephen Wolfe or with Joel Webben, Nick Fuentes, um, J.D. Hall, any of these people who are on the fringe, people in Ogden, just a variety of different individuals who are vying for control over this stuff and this movement. And it really is anti-Christ-like because it goes back to, what do they love? Where does their love lie? And right out of the heart, or out of the mouth, is what is shown in the heart. That's very clear. And what they continue to speak is not love for God, it's hate of the Jews. And it's not like this, ADF thing, or ADL thing, where it's, anything can be called anti-Semitism if, these days, if even, I don't know, something stupid happens and it offends a Jew or something like that. No, these people are avidly opposed to and loathe the Jews. They don't care about their salvation. They believe that the church has completely and utterly replaced Israel, and that there's no reason for these Jews to even be around anymore. They're imposter Jews, which is absolutely insane. How are they imposter Jews? My gosh, that doesn't make any sense at all. But it's this opposition to dispensationalism, opposition to Zionism, opposition to Judaism, and a lot of dots being connected that are just complete and utter nonsense. And it's sad to see. It's really sad to see that they then have such an influence over young men, specifically Christian men, supposedly, and are leading them astray to a different gospel that has absolutely nothing to do with Jesus, has nothing to do with repenting for your sins, has nothing to do with holiness, has nothing to do with loving God, but the unification is hate. Unification is hate. Hate the Jews, and we will everything else will be transcended. Everything else will be overlooked as long as you hate the Jews. Then it doesn't matter. Then we can be united. Then we can be happy. Then we can push forward our political agenda. And once we actually come into power, then that's when the real issue will happen. My goodness. Once they, if ever, get into any sort of political power, then the infighting will be absolutely crazy. Who can be the purest? It'll be a race towards the most Jew hating. It ultimately will be a race towards statism and Jew hating. So really national socialism, as done by the Germans, is ultimately what they'll race towards, because that is what they'll see as the purest form of that. Because even the Christian nationalism, their nationalism isn't even regular nationalism, which is right, we kind of had redefined and has kind of been called patriotism for a while, to get away from like we're kind of to give credence to the proposition nation, right? America isn't a people, it's an idea. So you have to be patriotic towards the idea, towards freedom. You can't be nationalistic for your nation. Now, these guys have taken nationalism and put nationalism as statism. And not statism as in each individual state controls its own, uh, like 10th Amendment kind of stuff, states' rights stuff. No, it's statism in that it's socialistic in nature. It's tyrannical in nature. It's the government gets to decide and have control over more areas over people's lives, including religion, including the worship of God and what is acceptable in public and not, and even in private and not, as well as just other interventions. It's really even like it's feudalism is what it is. It's medieval monarchy level stuff where you'll belong to the certain church that's the state church. This is the acceptable way of worship. If you don't do it, we have public blasphemy laws and we'll kill you, burn you at the stake, do this, that, and the other thing, fine you. Jews can live with us, right? The Muslim model. Jews and Christians can live amongst us, but they just pay an expensive tax. So it is this very like feudalistic, monarchical, medieval form of government that they want to go back to, which is absolutely horrible. It's so absolutely, utterly moronic to want to go back towards that. That system does not work. It does not foster innovation. It does not foster godliness. It is what directly led to the Reformation, even to the Great Schism of 1054. When you have state-run churches or states ran by churches, then things don't go well. The lines get blurred, people get killed. There is no the focus and emphasis is not on individual liberty, which it doesn't mean that hyper individualism. It means individual liberty of salvation being an individual's issue. So it isn't. It goes back to the whole love thing. Do you love God? That is a personal issue. That is not a state's issue. That isn't even in the Old Testament, right? They were given the law, and the law, there was a system of punishing wrongdoing and so forth, but there was never a punishment of not loving God by Israel, by the priesthood, or by the state of Israel. No, that was given to God himself. He reserved that right to punish people who came before him, who offered sacrifices without love, right? Who did it out of a wrong spirit, a wrong heart. And he did. He certainly killed people because of that. Think of Samuel's sons, right? I believe they were all killed, even though they went about the motions and did their things. They were unfaithful to God. They didn't love him. They were killed. Janus and Jambres, right? They withheld from the Holy Spirit. God struck them down. It wasn't the church doesn't pronounce that judgment. State doesn't pronounce that judgment. And that's ultimately the failure of wanting to go back to this system that these Christian nationalists are advocating for, is that they miss the whole aspect of love. And maybe they'd be like, well, you're just a pietist kind of a deal. But whatever, like, piety is a lot better than authoritarianism, I would say. When's a pietist ever killed anyone, right? Pietist preaches the gospel and lives it. So it's a very strange thing. It's a very discouraging thing to see these things happen and to see their, the number of likes or views that they get or type of attention that they get. But they're unfortunately, their judgment will come, and perhaps that is something to pray for, is for their salvation, for their repentance, and maybe that they will actually see God's love and fulfill the law to love God and to love their neighbors. But I don't know. It is quite discouraging. However, on a good note, I guess, trying to figure out what that is. Yeah, on a good note, had a wonderful. I do these seminars, these finance seminars, and there are two focuses. The one being personal finance, and kind of stewardship, how to steward finance as well personally, so budgeting, understanding financial concepts with investing, debt, income, spending, and planning for life and what that looks like, figuring out who you need to care for, provide for, what your goals are, the processes to get there, and so forth. That's kind of the dollars and cents. And then there's another aspect which is business related, which is more business finance, strategy, operations, planning, that whole side of the aisle, mirrored stewardship of finances and how that translates to the business world. And had a good one with my friends at Hushabye, doing great work in Phoenix, helping little babies and their families, and that went quite well. Looking forward to doing it again, hopefully with them on a regular basis to help their staff out as well as the families that they're helping. They're really helping the most down and out people, and it's just a blessing to be a part of that. But it went well. It was very exciting. It was very fun to do. Looking forward to other opportunities to do that as well. If you're interested, you're welcome to reach out if you would like that done for your church. If you have a nonprofit that wants to do that for its clientele, the people it serves, the community it serves, businesses even for their own staff, anything like that. Really, it's open to anyone. I think it's good, and it's not like Dave Ramsey where it's it's going to be a square peg in a round hole kind of a thing, and it's just you do this process and you're going to get a set outcome. No, I don't believe in that's just indoctrination. That's just sheer compliance. I believe in education. I believe in providing a framework. I believe in providing the details as well as the overview so that people can make their own decisions and they can pursue after the things that are actually meaningful to them and get to the outcomes that they want, not the outcomes that someone has told them they should have. So that's both for business and for personal. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out. Looking forward, and I'll keep you guys posted on when other times like that happen, especially ones that are publicly available, and just kind of push forward with that. And it's going to be good. It's going to be exciting. Look at that. We're coming up on our hour. And I'd say that's the good news. The other good news is that we have another year that God has gifted us with to live. Use it well. Use this year to love Him more, and whatever else beyond that, let Him speak to you. Search His Word for, pray about, but do it all out of love for Him, because He certainly has shown His love for you in a vast, really incomprehensible way. And all He asks in return is for you to submit and love Him, right? To trust in Jesus, to love Him. And my goodness, what a beautiful thing that happens then, right? We get brought into His family. We're co-heirs for eternity with God, our Creator, and what joy we will have in that coming life and even in this life. So pray about that. Blessings from Arizona and from the misty, rainy weather, the cool weather, and we'll talk to you soon. We'll talk to you another time.